The first time my child called me dad became a tender spot I could never bring myself to talk about. But I was a father who left his child behind. When David was learning to identify luxury car emblems and scorning my wooden pendants as cheap, I chose to hit exit and return to the real world to save my own life. While he was hearing, "Your father left because of you," I was in another world, teaching my daughter Mary how to write and carving a new pendant for her. Now that I'm back, I can only watch my 13-year-old son through the glass of a conference room as he solves problems, walking over to ruffle his hair and say, "You're doing great." He never mentions the Johnson family, just hands me perfect test scores and reminds me of his birthday, asking if I still remember that day. Meanwhile, my younger child asks, "If he's had you for so long, how much longer do I get to have you?" I'm caught between my two children, unable to voice the truth. No matter what I do, one of them will always feel like they're the one being abandoned. I used to be a player, someone sent into the world of a novel to complete a mission. I never expected the mission to fail. Right after I got married and had a child, the system sent me back to the real world. That part of my life was slowly buried under the routine of daily existence, until the system showed up again one day. It told me that if I didn't go back, my son in that world would break free of his narrative constraints and become the book's most terrifying villain. I hadn't been in contact with the system for years, but it suddenly reappeared. I was on my way back from amusement park with my wife, Hannah, and our daughter, Mary. Mary was holding my hand tightly, begging me to get her McDonald's for dinner. I was just about to tell her that we couldn't eat burgers all the time because it wasn't healthy when a familiar electronic hum buzzed in my ear. Then came the system's stiff, mechanical voice. "Host, it's been a while." It seemed to pause for a few seconds, as if taking in the sight of my happy little family and not knowing how to proceed. Finally, it managed to say, "Do you remember your mission? Ever since you left, the target's mental state has been deteriorating. She's extremely unstable now, and the son you left behind has been demanding to see you for years. Can you go back and check on them?" I froze. It was a part of my life I could never truly forget. Back then, I had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and the doctors gave me less than 3 years to live. During the worst of my treatment, I made a deal with this system and was sent into the world of a trashy, melodramatic novel. My mission was to win over the second female lead, a character who had already been written out of the main story. She was Ava Johnson, the only daughter of the powerful Johnson family, a classic heiress. Her parents had arranged a marriage for her long ago, but she was stubbornly in love with the novel's hero. She would rather be with that penniless man than marry anyone else. Naturally, she became an obstacle to the main couple's happiness, and her story was destined for a tragic end. My mission was to make her give up her hopeless obsession with the hero and heroine and agree to marry me instead. If I succeeded, I could choose to live out the rest of my days in that world, in that body. Since I didn't have much time left in the real world, I treasured the opportunity. When the heroine, Ava, was abandoned by the hero and left with nowhere to turn, I was always there to comfort her. I kept her company, took her out to clear her head, and occasionally prepared little surprises for her. It might be a bouquet of her favorite flowers, a book that perfectly matched her mood, or a cup of her favorite coffee with a pastry. In my old life, I had a passion for wood carving, so I often made her small wooden charms. It started as a small gesture, but soon became a habit, and she gradually grew accustomed to having me around. She told me her favorite was a rose pendant I carved for her from a piece of delicate sandalwood. After that, the little rose was always around her neck. Her attitude toward me slowly softened from cold and distant to warm and reliant. I thought I had successfully changed her story, that we would naturally fall in love and get married. But things didn't go according to plan. One day, at the system's request, I went to the hospital for a checkup. As I rounded a corner in the hallway, I unexpectedly saw Ava coming out of the maternity ward. She was glowing, her face lit up with a smile she couldn't contain. But the moment she saw me, the smile vanished. The color drained from her face, and her eyes filled with panic and disbelief. I only managed a quick glance at her. She quickly shoved something into her purse. My mind was racing, and I couldn't immediately process what was happening but I had a gut feeling that something was wrong. I opened my mouth to ask, but the noise of the crowded hallway swallowed my voice. I just waved her over, signaling that we should go home and talk. The moment the car door closed, she rushed to explain. It turned out that one night, when we had both had too much to drink, she had gotten pregnant with my child. She said she was determined to have a baby. In her mind, a conceived life was already a person, and her conscience wouldn't allow her to get an abortion. To her, it would be the same as murdering her own child. I took this to mean she was ready to accept my proposal, so I took out the ring I had been carrying. But her expression suddenly grew cold. "James," she said softly, "my parents will never let us get married. You don't have the right background or family connections. If I told them, they would just force me to get rid of the baby. Please don't force my hand. Once the baby is born and things have settled down, maybe they'll have no choice but to accept it." I listened to her reasoning and remained silent for a long time before finally nodding in agreement. He was my first child. I named him David. The excitement and joy of being a father for the first time are impossible to put into words. Perhaps because my own father was an alcoholic who never cared about me except to take out his gambling losses on me. I poured everything I had into raising David. I was determined to help him become a good, capable man. He made me angry sometimes, but no matter how furious I got, I never hit him. I always believed that a child isn't your property. He was his own person, an individual just like me. Around the Johnson family, I was constantly looked down on. In the world of that novel, I was a nobody with no connections. The Johnsons were a powerful and influential family, and in their eyes, I was just some schemer who had tricked their daughter, hoping to use their name to get ahead. Ava was their only daughter, the apple of their eye. No matter how much they despised me, they still saw David as her son. Their position was crystal clear. They wanted the child, but not the father. Every weekend, they would pick David up and take him to the Johnson family estate to see his grandparents. By the time he was 1 year old, he already had his own bank account. By 3 or 4, while I was still taking the bus or hailing a cab to pick him up, David could identify a Rolls-Royce or a Cullinan just by looking at the car's interior. When he was 5 or 6, I'd often have him on my lap, teaching him basic arithmetic. One day, he tossed his pencil aside, looked up at me, and asked with complete seriousness, "Grandpa says I'm going to inherit the Johnson family company one day. If I'm going to inherit it anyway, why do I need to learn all this stuff? What's the point?" He paused for a moment before continuing. "And Dad, why is my last name Smith? You're just a working guy. You're poor, and you're not going anywhere. Other than being my dad, what good are you to the Johnson family? Why don't I just take their last name instead?" I never imagined I would hear words like that from my own child. I was just stunned, unable to speak for a moment. David must have seen the look on my face because he quickly added in a small voice, "That's what Grandpa said." No matter how much I loved him, being insulted like that by my own son sent a chill through me. My tone hardened without me realizing it. "David, you can choose whatever last name you want when you're older. That's your right. Whether you're a Smith or a Johnson, I'll respect your choice. But I expect you to respect the fact that I am your father. I have never done you wrong. I raised you without ever expecting anything in return. I certainly never thought about what use you could be to me. I'm raising you for one reason and one reason only, because you are my son." I suddenly felt a surge of emotion, my mind flashing back to the despair I felt waiting for my diagnosis in that hospital hallway. Every second had felt like waiting for a death sentence. Back then, I'd even thought that living was harder than dying, that it would have been a relief for it all to be over. Lying in that hospital bed, on the days when the treatments made me feel less than human, I had asked myself the same question he was asking me. If we're all going to die eventually, what's the point of fighting so hard to live? So I looked at David and said, "You just asked why you need to study if you're going to inherit the company anyway. Let me ask you a question in return. If everyone dies in the end, why should any of us bother to live at all?" I said a great deal more after that, and David cried until he was gasping for air. Ava couldn't take it anymore. She picked him up and took him straight back to the Johnson estate. It was a long time before either of them came back. It was months before I saw them again. I had cooked some of his favorite food and went to the estate to pick him up planning to apologize and explain that I had been too harsh with him. But as I arrived, I saw him getting out of a black luxury car. He was holding Ava's hand with one hand and tightly gripping another man's hand with the other. In his small, childish voice, he said, "Uncle Ethan, can you marry my mommy? My mommy and daddy aren't married, so you can marry her." I stood frozen on the spot, the container of food heavy in my hand. Ethan, he was the hero of this novel's world. After all this time, he was back. A smirk played on his lips as he glanced at Ava. "And why don't you want her dad to be with your mom?" he asked, half joking. David hesitated for a second. "Because Grandpa doesn't like my dad," he replied. "And my mommy doesn't like him either." Ava just furrowed her brow slightly, not saying a single word in my defense. I should have seen it coming. In the original novel, there was a scene where Ava drugged the hero and took him to a hotel room. The next morning, she woke up crying and demanding he take responsibility for her. She even faked a pregnancy later to force him into marriage. So that day in the hospital, the moment I saw her frantically hiding that paperwork, I should have known. She was planning to use my child, this very real pregnancy, to force the hero to marry her. She just never expected me to walk in on her. Even though she was carrying my child, her mind was still consumed with getting back together with the hero. She rejected my proposal while dreaming of a reunion with him. And I, like a fool, held on to the ridiculous hope that time would change things. But reality refused to follow my script. This devoted but delusional heroine was always going to be drawn back to the hero. Even her own son was no exception. I felt like a complete fool. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just turned around and walked away. That night, I reactivated the system. I was giving up the mission. I wanted to go home. The system seemed surprised by my decision. "Host, why? Even if the target doesn't marry you, you can still remain in this world. As long as she doesn't marry someone else, you can continue living as you are." I thought about David looking up at Ethan and saying those words, and a bitter smile crossed my face. Now that the hero is back, knowing Ava, it's only a matter of time before she chooses him. I'd rather go back to the real world. Maybe if I get treatment soon enough, I can buy myself a few more years. Seeing my resolve, the usually cold and mechanical system let out a rare sigh. "I understand, host. Please wait. I will submit a request to my superiors and see if there's anything I can do to help." It was silent for the rest of the night. When its voice returned the following evening, it was tinged with an excitement it couldn't quite contain. "Host, the request was approved. You can go back, and you'll return to the real world at the exact moment you first left. I've taken the points you earned in this world, added some of my own, and exchanged them for a healthy body for you. When you return, your cancer will be completely cured. You don't have to worry anymore." I was stunned. "You used your own points?" I asked. "Won't that get you into trouble?" The system made a sound that was almost a chuckle. "It's fine. It's good to stay on friendly terms with our hosts. Who knows, we might need your help again someday." As promised, when I returned to the real world, the system cured my cancer. I lived a normal life. I met and fell in love with my wife, and we had a child together. The system never contacted me again. Until today. Its voice sounded drained. "It's about the boy, David. He's showing clear signs of going down a dark path. He's only 12 or 13, but he's unnervingly mature. He's withdrawn, has almost no friends. We're concerned that if he continues on this trajectory, he'll become a full-fledged villain. That's why I'm here. Host, we need you to go back and stay with him for 1 month." I remembered how I'd given up on the mission. If the system hadn't used its own points to petition on my behalf, I probably wouldn't be alive today. So, despite my deep reluctance to return to that world, I decided to agree. "I have to talk to my wife first," I said. "I'm a married man now." "Of course," the system replied instantly. "I'll wait." My wife, Hannah, already knew about my past. She's an illustrator who works at my company, and before we even started dating, I told her the entire story of my time in the world of that novel. So when I mentioned the system, she didn't look surprised. She just paused in the middle of chopping vegetables and looked up at me, her breath catching slightly. "James, are you going back? You're not. You're not going to stay there, are you?" Her voice was trembling by the last few words. I smiled and tried to soothe her. "Of course not. The system said it's only for a month. There's no mission this time. No matter what happens, I won't stay there. The words were barely out of my mouth when the kitchen door flew open. Mary ran in and grabbed onto me. Daddy, where are you going? Are you going to leave me? Don't you want me anymore? I was taken aback for a second. Then I laughed and scooped her in my arms, stroking her hair. Of course not. You're my little girl. I could never leave you. But she didn't believe me. She just kept shaking her head, clinging to my sleeve as if I would vanish the moment she let go. But I heard you, she said, her eyes welling up with tears. You told Mommy you were going somewhere far away. To see another kid. Her voice began to tremble. Daddy, is it because I wanted a burger today? I won't ask again. I'll never eat McDonald's or KFC again. Please don't go. I had never told Mary about David. I always felt there was no need to burden a child with such things. It was better to let the past be the past. But seeing how hurt and upset she was, I suddenly realized that it was wrong to treat her like she couldn't understand. Maybe being honest with her was the better approach. I sighed and put my hands on her shoulders. The truth is, I said slowly, Daddy has another child. He's your older brother, and he hasn't seen me in a very long time. I'm just going back to celebrate his birthday with him, and then I'll come right back. Okay. Mary was quiet for a moment before she nodded. She clearly didn't understand everything, but she said with determination, Then I want to go too. I want to meet my brother. Can I, Daddy? I paused. It wasn't an impossible request. I called out to the system. Can she come with me? The system, seemingly worn down by the circumstances, was ready to agree to anything. As long as I agreed to go, it seemed willing to bend any rule. 2 people it is. It's just one more child. How much trouble can she cause? It then produced a device that looked like a smartphone from its storage space and tossed it to me. David's birthday is in 1 month. Please take care of him until then. When a month is up, just press the button on this phone, and you'll be able to return. The system paused. Is that acceptable? Mary wasn't protesting anymore, so I turned to look at Hannah. She was leaning against the wall, staring at her feet. When she felt my eyes on her, she looked up. James, I have only one condition. If you have to go, you need to make a deal with the system. If anything goes wrong and you can't come back in a month, I need a way to get to that world, to find you and get in touch with you. And so I returned to the world of the novel. The system placed Mary and me in the same spot where I had left, a modern apartment complex in the heart of the city. Since I was only staying for a month, finding a job would be a hassle. The system simply rented the same apartment I had lived in before, Unit 728. I noticed the unit seemed to have been vacant for years, so I signed the lease. You don't mind? The system asked. I shook my head. It's fine. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. It didn't feel like a place that had been vacant for years. It felt more like a place where time had been frozen, giving me the strange sensation of having been thrown back into the past. The apartment was spotless and tidy, and even the furniture was arranged exactly as I'd left it. The slippers I'd left in the shoe cabinet were still there. A long, dried bouquet of flowers still stood perfectly in the vase by the window. On the table sat an unfinished wood carving I had been working on as a gift for David. It was a greedy little squirrel, its face already outlined with chubby cheeks and bright eyes, looking just like David when he was little. It was curled into a funny little ball that made you want to smile. David was my first child, my only real connection to this strange world. I'll never forget the moment the nurse placed him in my arms. The feeling of being a father for the first time was more than just joy and novelty. It was a profound sense of responsibility I had never known before. I've always believed that a father's job is to raise his child right. It's like a writer who can't abandon a story halfway through, or a sculptor who must see their work through to the final cut. To me, nothing could be more natural. But what is an author to do when the main character of the story decides he no longer wants to be a part of it? Once, Ava and I had a fight, and in a rage, she moved back to her parents' house, leaving our babbling son with me without a second thought. For that whole time, it was just David and me. The first word he ever learned to say was Dad. The first full sentence he ever spoke, he said while holding up his chubby little hands and grinning at me, Daddy, I like you. How did things change so drastically? David began to push me away, while at the same time developing a strange adoration for Ava. I never told him that. In truth, Ava didn't even like him. The day he was born, everyone crowded around to congratulate her on having a son. But in front of the entire room, she said, "What's there to congratulate? Is everyone really that obsessed with having a boy? I don't care if it's a boy or a girl. I don't like boys. I wanted a girl." I understood why she said it. When Ava was growing up, her parents constantly told her, "If only you were a boy, then we'd have a proper heir for the family business." Later, when Ava insisted on having the baby, her parents demanded that if it was a boy, he must take the Johnson family name. The only reason David's last name was Smith and not Johnson was because Ava, for once, refused to give in to her parents. As David grew older, he learned to weigh his options. He understood that he had to make a choice between the interests of his powerful family and the father who had raised him. This was Mary's first time in this world, and everything was new and exciting to her. She pressed her face against the window, pointing at everything. "Daddy, is that tall thing a tower? What's that over there?" I finally just took her hand and led her downstairs. "Come on," I said. "I'll take you to see the ocean." She skipped happily behind me. Just as we were leaving the complex, we ran right into an old colleague of mine and his daughter. I had lived in this world for years during my first stay. I had built a career as a professional interior designer, had a steady job, good friends, and a solid reputation in the industry. The moment he saw me, he grabbed my arm, his voice filled with shock. "James, where have you been all these years?" He paused, then continued. "Ever since you left, our firm's performance has been in a nosedive. We haven't landed a major contract in ages. We just got a new project, and there's no way I'm letting you get away. You have to come with me to the site today." I didn't know whether to be annoyed or amused. I was only going to be here for a month. I had no intention of getting involved in work. I tried to politely decline, but he was persistent. Mary grew impatient waiting for us to finish talking and ran off to play with my colleague's daughter. The girl was about 14 or 15, just starting middle school, but she and Mary hit it off immediately and were soon running off hand in hand. "Let my daughter show yours around," my friend said with a laugh. "We live in the same complex, and she's been here for over a decade. She knows everyone. It's perfectly safe." The complex wasn't large, and it was a gated community. Besides, this man was one of the few people in this world I truly trusted. I didn't think twice about it. But not even 10 minutes later, his phone rang. It was his daughter. "Dad, you and the uncle have to come quick. Someone's fighting with Mary." Calling it a fight wasn't quite accurate. It was more like Mary was being bullied. My friend and I had just wrapped up our conversation, agreeing to meet at the office in a few days. The call sent us racing toward the playground. It wasn't far, just by the sandbox near the flower beds. I saw Mary pinned to the ground by a boy, unable to move. He looked to be around 10 years old and was throwing punches at her while shouting insults. My friend's daughter was desperately trying to pull the boy off, but whether she wasn't strong enough or he was just that determined, he didn't let go until we got there. My mind went blank. Mary has always been a sweet kid who never causes trouble. She's gentle and outgoing with lots of friends. I was flooded with regret. It was our first day back in this world. I should have kept her by my side instead of letting my attention wander. I didn't hesitate. I rushed forward, grabbed the boy by the collar, and threw him to the side. "Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere? Why were you fighting?" I was so frantic, my only thought was whether Mary was hurt. I didn't even get a good look at the boy. I just shoved him away on instinct. In my peripheral vision, I saw the boy sitting on the ground, rubbing his knees. He wasn't crying or making a scene. He just sat there with his head down, looking dazed and unsure what to do next. "I'm okay, Daddy," Mary said, reaching up to touch my face. "He didn't hit me. He was just trying to take my necklace. The one you gave me, remember? It was a small wooden pendant I had carved for her myself shortly after she was born last year. It wasn't valuable. Why would anyone start a fight over it?" I looked up and, for the first time, got a proper look at the boy. He was wearing a black shirt and a baseball cap pulled down low over his face. But now, as if he could feel me looking at him, he slowly lifted his head. The cold, distant expression on his face was suddenly replaced by a look of hurt. He stood up and walked toward me, pulling Mary away from my side. His voice was quiet, but he kept repeating the same words. Dad, it's you. You came back for David, didn't you? David was only 6 when I left, about Mary's age now. 7 years had passed. He was 13. I could still see a hint of the little boy he used to be in his face, but at first glance, I hadn't recognized him at all. Couldn't the system have shown me a recent photo? I stood there, frozen, as it dawned on me that in grabbing and shoving him, I had just used physical force against my son for the very first time. But David didn't seem to care. He just opened his hand, revealing a small wooden pendant in his palm. Isn't this the gift you gave me, Dad? Why does she have one too? She must have stolen it. So what if I hit her? I had made a similar pendant for David when he was a baby. He had been very sick, and we were taking him to see all sorts of doctors. I carved the charm for good luck, for my own peace of mind, and put it around his neck. He loved it when he was little, always fiddling with it in his hands. But as he got older and started spending time with wealthier friends, he must have decided it was cheap and embarrassing. One day, he came back from the Johnson estate, and the wooden pendant was gone, replaced by an expensive jade amulet. I asked him what had happened to it. He frowned, his eyes filled with impatience. All my friends said it's worthless. It's embarrassing for people like us to wear something so cheap. Remembering that, and now hearing David call Mary a thief, my heart sank. Mary was furious at the accusation. I didn't steal anything, she yelled, practically jumping up and down. It's mine. You're the one who tried to take it. You tried to steal the present my daddy gave me. Mary's words struck a nerve. David looked like an enraged lion, raising his fist again. What'd you say? Say that again. Who's your daddy? He's not your daddy. The system was right. David had become bitter and sharp-tongued, nothing like the little boy I remembered. I grabbed his wrist to stop him. That's enough, I said in a low, firm voice. Mary is my daughter. If you ever dare to touch your sister again, you will regret it. Sister. For a second, David's face was a complete blank. Dad only has one kid. Me. Not anymore, I said, standing up. I took the pendant from his hand and gave it back to Mary. I had carved that pendant for my daughter with my own hands, and no one was going to take it from her. David stood in front of me, staring at his empty palm with a lost expression. David, I asked, what are you doing here? Is anyone with you? Where's your mother? When I left this world, I had assumed Ava and Ethan would get married and live happily ever after with David in the Johnson family mansion. I thought I would be completely forgotten. But this situation didn't make any sense. Why was David wandering around by himself, with no adult supervision? My friend could see how confused I was. He walked over and lowered his voice. James, you really don't know? I don't run in those high society circles, but even I've heard the rumors. After you left, she and the boy barely saw each other. Ava moved out of the Johnson estate and has had almost nothing to do with him since. Can you believe it? A mother who doesn't even care about her own son. It's crazy. I took a deep breath and looked down at David. He was tugging on my shirt, looking up at me, and began to answer my earlier question. Someone called my grandpa's house just now. I answered the phone. They said someone wanted to rent unit 728 in this complex and wanted to know if Grandpa was willing to lease it. I remembered that was where the 3 of us used to live. So I asked who wanted to rent it, and they said your name, Dad. So I snuck over to see what was going on. He shot a look at Mary, as if to say, and then I ran into this pest. As for my mom, David's voice grew quiet. Ava hates me. She wants nothing to do with me. You're not going to leave me too, are you, Dad? So the Johnsons had bought the apartment after I left. Thinking of how spotless it was, I figured Ava must come by to clean it occasionally. Or maybe she was just a neat freak. In any case, I was only staying for a month, so it didn't really matter to me. The real problem I needed to deal with was David. And to do that, I had to talk to Ava. If the system's goal was to stop David from becoming a villain, then his mother was a crucial part of the equation. He was her son. How could she neglect him so completely? I hailed a cab for the 3 of us. My curiosity got the better of me, and I started asking more questions. We were all squeezed into the back seat, with me in the middle. David was leaning against the window, staring blankly at the passing scenery. He gave a lazy before speaking slowly. Ava hates me. She's always believed you left because of me. That if I hadn't made you angry, You two wouldn't have fought, and you wouldn't have gone away. In her eyes, a kid who can't even hold on to his own father is completely useless. As he said this, David lowered his head and subconsciously reached for his neck, as if searching for the pendant he had long since thrown away. But I've changed, Dad. I do all my homework. I study really hard, and my grades are great now. Grandpa even said I'll run the company one day. If you don't like Mom, I'll get rid of her. He slipped his hand into mine. Dad, he whispered, please don't leave this time. Okay. Before I could answer David, Mary puffed out her cheeks and cut in. Why would he stay? My mommy is waiting for Daddy at home. Daddy says we're a family of 3. If you came along, it would be too crowded. So Daddy's not going to take you. David's eyes instantly turned red. He raised his hand as if to grab Mary, but then he met my gaze and froze. It suddenly occurred to me that David was actually an incredibly sensitive child. Back at the sandbox, he must have sensed it. I was no longer the calm, rational father he remembered. When it came down to a choice between him and Mary, my instinct was to protect her. He didn't dare to lash out physically again, but he couldn't stop the insults from pouring out of his mouth. Liar! You disgusting little brat. He was about to say more, but I cut him off. Don't you ever let me hear you use that kind of language again, and you will not speak to my daughter that way. Do you understand? He shot me a resentful look, but finally gave a sullen nod. The Johnson family was a massive corporate dynasty, with controlling interests in dozens of publicly traded companies across countless industries. Even though they had their reservations about David, they had been grooming him to be the heir since he was a child. Ava was in charge of managing most of the family's assets. Standing in front of the corporate headquarters, I couldn't help but wonder what had become of the spoiled, willful heiress who had been forced to take over her father's empire. I turned to David. Lead the way, I said. Let's go find your mother. David hadn't been exaggerating. The Johnsons clearly took him seriously. He moved through the building with an air of ownership, and none of the employees so much as blinked at the sight of a 13-year-old boy walking around. His fingerprint was already in the security system. He took my hand and led me from the lobby to a private elevator that went straight to the top floor. The executive assistant at the front desk did a double take when she saw him, then gave a slight, respectful bow. Young Mr. Johnson, what brings you here today? Are you here to see your mother? I can let her know you've arrived. David squared his shoulders and gently nudged the assistant aside. That won't be necessary. I can come and go as I please. I don't need to be announced. David pushed the door open and walked right in. Inside the spacious office, Ava sat behind a large desk. She was wearing a black, knee-length dress that perfectly accentuated her slender figure. From where I stood, I could see her face in profile. It had hardly changed in 7 years. She was still just as beautiful. She was looking down, her attention focused on a document in her hands. Her dark eyes scanned the text, and her long, slender fingers turned the page. Her expression was cool and composed, with a professional calm. There was almost no trace of the spoiled, impulsive girl I once knew. But around her neck, she was still wearing the sandalwood rose pendant I had given her all those years ago. I couldn't imagine why she had kept it. She must have heard David come in, but she didn't even look up. She just turned another page and said coldly, "Haven't I told you not to come here? If you need something, go to your grandfather. I'm not your babysitter." I paused for a second before speaking. "Ava, we need to talk." It felt as if time had stopped. Ava's head snapped up, but she didn't say anything. Her expression didn't change. The office was so quiet that for a second, I wondered if she had even heard me. Then, she shot to her feet, her face a mask of disbelief as she stared at me. Her hand trembled, knocking a stack of papers from her desk onto the floor. She scrambled to pick them up, her usual composure gone. When she looked up again, her eyes were red, and her voice shook as she spoke. "It's been 7 years. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. James, you're back. You're not going to leave again, are you? We can be like we were before. We can be a family again, right?" I could only manage a helpless smile, unable to answer her rapid-fire questions. I just repeated what I had said before. "Ava, if you have time, I'd like to find a place where we can talk in private. Is that okay?" Ava seemed to snap out her trance. She wiped the corner of her eye and gave me a gentle smile. Okay, for all these years, I've wanted nothing more than to have a real talk with you. During this entire exchange, she never once glanced at David. She also completely failed to notice Mary, who was trailing behind him. Her eyes were fixed on me. I've always kept your favorite yerba mate here in the office for you. See, she smiled brightly and picked up a traditional gourd from her desk. This is the one you made for me. I've kept it all this time. Let me make you some. She was completely oblivious to the two children standing in her office. I caught the assistant's eye and gestured for her to take the kids into the adjoining room. By the time I turned back, Ava had prepared the tea and set it in front of me, her eyes watching me with anticipation. She had no way of knowing that I didn't even like that tea anymore. So many years had passed. Even my taste had changed. I gently pushed the cup aside, my mind focused on the real reason I was here, David. I had to stop him from going down a dark path, from becoming a villain who would only end up hurting himself and everyone around him. I only had a month, and I knew that as his mother, she was the key to everything. I decided to get straight to the point. Ava, I'm not here to catch up. I just want to ask you one thing. David adores you. Why do you treat him the way you do? Ava, who had been holding her cup, froze for a second. Then she slowly set the cup down. She took out a napkin and began meticulously wiping a smudge of lipstick from the silver straw. She lowered her voice. David, she blinked. I could see a deep sadness in her eyes. She forced a self-mocking smile. I always thought you left because he made you angry, that you didn't stay because of him. I was so stupid, wasn't I? She stood up and walked over to a bookshelf, pulling out an old photograph of the two of us. It was as if she was both lost in the past and painting a picture of the future. She pressed her hand against the glass, her fingertips tracing the edge of the frame as she spoke, slowly and deliberately. But things are different now. You came back for me. I know you must blame me for being such a failure as a mother, but I'll be better now. She turned to face me, her eyes shining with a frightening intensity, her face full of hope. I'm going to marry you. The three of us will have a good life together. We can move into the villa by the sea, or we can go back to our old apartment. I'll make breakfast for you and David every morning. We'll take him to school together, then I'll go to the office and you can go to your workshop. And we'll come home together at the end of the day. She spoke as if she were reading from script, as if she could see the entire scene playing out in front of her. Wouldn't that be nice? She asked softly. Let's start over. Ava's left hand was nervously twisting the hem of her dress. She probably didn't even realize she was doing it, but it was a clear sign of her anxiety. I looked at her, then raised my right hand, showing her the wedding ring on my finger. I'm married, Ava, and I have a daughter. There's no going back. I can't quite describe the look on Ava's face. It was as if she'd been plunged into ice water, all the color draining from her cheeks. What did you say? She whispered in disbelief. You're lying, aren't you, James? If you're married, then what about me? What about David? Weren't we a family? What does that make us now? How could you just go and start a new family with someone else? Just then, the office door was thrown open. Mary poked her head in, followed by the assistant who had failed to stop her, and David, who was glaring at her with open hostility. Daddy, Mary cried, jumping into my arms. It's 5 o'clock, and I'm hungry. It's time for dinner. We've been out all day. When are we going home? Mommy's waiting for us. The assistant gently touched Mary's shoulder. Sweetie, this is an office. You can't just run in here. Mary paid her no attention. She just looked from David to Ava. Is that your mommy? She asked David. She's pretty, but she looks mean. My daddy only likes nice people, like my mommy. If Ava hadn't noticed Mary before, she certainly did now. After hearing her call me daddy over and over, even she could figure out a relationship. Ava's expression darkened, and she stared at Mary, her gaze so intense it felt like she was trying to see right through her. Mary, however, was completely unfazed. She didn't care who this pretty lady was, or how strange this new world and all the people in it were. She had already forgotten that I'd told her we would be here for a month. To her, even one day away from home felt like an eternity. All she knew was that her daddy was here, and no one was going to take him away from her. Let's go, Daddy, she said, pulling on my hand. Let's go home. She squeezed my hand and looked up at me, wrinkling her nose. It smells like tea in here. Daddy, I thought you said you didn't like tea. I turned to look at Ava, who was still leaning against the bookshelf. I found David wandering around outside by himself, so I brought him here, I said slowly. I came to tell you that according to the information I have, if David continues on his current path, he's going to end up in a very bad place. I can't stay in this world for long, but you're his mother. I felt I had a responsibility to warn you. Ava just mumbled a soft, her head bowed in a posture of utter defeat. I took Mary's hand and was about to leave when she suddenly called out to me. James, do you really not like yerba mate? I smiled. You're the one who likes it. Back then, a lot of the things I liked were just me trying to please you. Since the system had already rented the apartment and paid the deposit, there was no reason for me to move. One day, I remember the new project my old colleague had been so insistent about, so I took a cab over to the office. I'd always had a good reputation there, and since I had nothing better to do, I figured I could help them out. I looked over some of their plans and offered a few suggestions on the design. Luckily, the firm had a daycare area for employees' kids, so while I was in the conference room sketching out revisions, Mary was being well looked after. Ava never contacted me again, which didn't surprise me. Everyone knew I had a wife now. If she reached out, what would that make her? The other woman? David, on the other hand, started coming by almost every day. It was his summer vacation, and he didn't seem to have anything else to do. He would show up with a small backpack filled with workbooks and sit quietly at a desk near mine, working through his assignments. Occasionally, an old colleague who knew about my connection to the Johnson family would walk by, give him a second glance, and say something like, James, your son is a good kid. Quiet. Looks like he's a hard worker, too. Whenever that happened, David would proudly pull a test paper out of his bag. Thank you, sir. I was first in my grade on the last exam. My teacher praised me. Then he would sidle up to me and hold the paper up for me to see, as if it were a precious treasure. Dad, I got a nearly perfect score in every subject, especially math. My teacher recommended me for the math Olympiad. I get it now. If you want to inherit a company, you have to get good grades. He stuck a glance at me, and I knew exactly what he was thinking about. He was remembering what I had said to him 7 years ago, all because of a few math problems. If everyone dies in the end, why should any of us bother to live at all? It was clear he still didn't understand what I had meant. I sighed softly, not sure how to respond. I just nodded and ruffled his hair. That's great. Your grandparents must be very proud. David didn't answer, deliberately avoiding any mention of the Johnson family in front of me. After a moment, he hugged my arm and abruptly changed the subject. Dad, my birthday's in a few days. What are we going to do? The driver arrived to pick him up. As David slung his backpack over his shoulder, he asked, Dad, do you remember what day my birthday is? His eyes were filled with a mixture of anxiety and hope. Of course I remembered. It wasn't just because the system had told me I could return to my own world after midnight on his birthday. It was because David was my first child. I had spent years with him in this world, and my feelings for him were real. How could I ever forget? I adjusted the straps on his backpack and smiled. Of course I remember. I could never forget. As the car pulled away, David, sitting in the passenger seat, turned to look back at me. It was the first time I had ever seen him smile so brightly. It was a clean, sunny, almost goofy grin. Dad, he yelled, waving. Can you give me a birthday present? He paused, then added carefully, I'll get you a present too, Dad. I turned around to see Mary standing behind me, her little backpack on, having just come from the daycare. The moment I turned, she ran over and grabbed my hand. Daddy, let's go home for dinner. Her obsession with dinner made me laugh. On the way home, I brought up David. Do you still not like him? Mary nodded, then shook her head, then scratched her chin as if she were deep in thought. At first, she said, nodding seriously, I didn't like him because he tried to hit me for no reason. She frowned and thought for a moment. But now, I think he's kind of sad, because even I can tell that you don't really want to be here, Daddy. But he keeps trying to make you do things you don't want to do. I had originally planned to give David a new wood-carved pendant for his birthday. I had noticed that whenever he saw Mary, his eyes would fixate on the red cord around her neck. He would start to raise his hand, then quickly pull it back. I had a feeling that if I hadn't strictly forbidden him from touching her, he would have tried to snatch it from her by now. So I bought the materials to carve a new one for him. But as I started working, I realized I couldn't quite remember my old technique. It was one of those moments I'd had countless times over the past few years, a sudden, sharp realization that time had changed so many things. You really can't go back. On the morning of my last day, I frowned at the half-finished pendant in my hand and decided to just buy him a gift instead. I threw on a jacket and headed for the door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see Ava. She had barely made any effort to see me since I'd been back. Now here she was, curled up on the floor by my door, her head bowed. I had no idea how long she'd been waiting there. She jumped to her feet the moment she heard the door open, her eyes full of hope. She forced a smile. "James, it's David's birthday today. Can the three of us? Can we celebrate it with him together? It's been so long since we all had a proper meal together as a family. We could make a reservation at his favorite restaurant. What do you think?" I didn't have much time left, and I couldn't be bothered to argue with her. I glanced at my watch and nodded. "Fine, but let's not go to a restaurant. I've already ordered food, but it won't be here until this afternoon. Right now, I need to go buy him a present." I slung my briefcase over my shoulder and headed for the elevator. I heard footsteps behind me. Ava had followed me. "I haven't gotten him a gift yet either," she said. "Let's go together." She paused, then added, "And there's something I need to talk to you about." In the car, she kept twisting the hem of her dress, her fingers fidgeting nervously. She was the one who said she wanted to talk, but she was silent the entire drive. It wasn't until we were pulling into the mall parking garage that she finally broke. She unbuckled her seatbelt and smoothed the wrinkles from her dress, her eyes briefly flicking to the wedding ring on my hand. "James," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "I've been thinking about what you said, that there's no going back for us. Is there really no chance at all? Even if you're married and have a child, that all happened in another world. If you stay here, we can pretend you never left. We can pretend you never met anyone else. And as for Mary, you know I've always wanted a daughter. If you love her, I can love her too. I can treat her like she's my own. I would never let her feel unwelcome." She was so earnest that her stubbornness felt like a physical force in the car. I stared at her in disbelief. "Ava, are you saying you're willing to be the other woman?" She actually smiled. "As long as you stay, I don't care what anyone calls me. We can get married in this world, James. Wouldn't that be wonderful?" I threw open my car door, got out, and slammed it shut. "Impossible," I said, enunciating every word. "My wife is waiting for me. You can't even begin to imagine what a wonderful person she is." Ava sat stunned in the car. She slowly lowered her head, her gaze falling on the rose pendant she wore. While I was trying to win her over, I had given her many little wooden carvings. She had told me that the sandalwood rose was her favorite. She used to wear it all the time, but eventually she stopped. Compared to her drawers full of expensive jewelry, a handmade trinket must have seemed cheap and crude. Eventually, she forgot she even had it. Looking back, for a family like the Johnsons, appearances were everything. It wasn't just Ava. I lost count of the number of times David complained to me. "It's so cheap, Dad. It's embarrassing to wear this. My friends will make fun of me. Why do you still dress like that when you go out? Look at the watches other people's dads wear." It was as if he felt he had to shed his own skin and put on a new, more glamorous one that fit in with their circle just to have a chance. As far as the Johnsons were concerned, the fact that they even allowed me to set foot in their world was a great act of charity. I took a deep breath. I stopped in front of a luxury goods store, pointed to a necklace in the window, and told the sales clerk, "I'll take that one, please. Gift wrapped." Since the system was footing the bill, I figured I might as well get him something that lived up to his family standards. I was surprised to see Ava still waiting for me when I came out of the mall. She was standing by the entrance, looking as if she had pushed our earlier conversation to the back of her mind. "James, let's go find David," she said, getting back into the car as if nothing had happened. "Let's celebrate his birthday with him." "Okay." That last "okay" was almost a plea. Ich glanced over her, confused. In the month I'd been back, it was obvious that she and David were practically strangers. But if this one birthday dinner could bring them even a little bit closer, it would be a good thing for David. "Okay," I agreed. The celebration was simple. just the four of us around a table full of food. I had ordered takeout and cooked a few dishes myself. It was a lot like how Hannah and I celebrated Mary's birthday. Mary was on her best behavior, probably because she knew she would be seeing her mother soon. She sat quietly in the corner, not making a peep. She watched as I gave David his present, placed a paper crown on his head, and pushed the cake in front of him. "You're 14 now," I said, lighting the candles one by one. "Make a wish, David." Mary stood up and flicked off the lights. In the dim candlelight, David's face looked soft and indistinct. He clasped his hands together and looked up at me. "Dad, can I wish for anything I want?" Before I could answer, he whispered, "Then I wish that you could stay with me forever." The room fell silent. I met his gaze. He had asked me to stay more than once, and every time I told him I couldn't, that I had someone waiting for me in another world. "David, you should make a different wish," I said, shaking my head. But for once, he was stubborn. "No, this is the one I want." All this time, he had been on his best behavior, trying so hard to prove that he had changed. But now, he seemed like a different person. His eyes were filled with a raw jealousy as he pointed at Mary. "She's had you for so long. Does she get to have you forever? I don't care if she has to stay here with you." "But why her?" David's eyes began to turn red. "Why does she get to steal my dad away from me?" I glanced at Ava. She hadn't said a word, just sat there and let David's emotions spiral out of control. Mary, who had been sitting so quietly, stood up, her little fists clenched. "I didn't steal him. He's my daddy. You're the one who didn't want him." I don't know which of Mary's words set him off, but David shoved the cake aside, shot to his feet, and stumbled over to the cabinet where I kept my things. He yanked open a drawer and pulled out a small box. Inside was the phone the system had given me, the device that would let me leave this world. His face was a mixture of hurt and pure hatred. He started backing away toward the window. "It's all Mom's fault. It's her fault for how she treated you. Don't blame me, Dad. I know this is how you talk to the other world. If I destroy it, you won't be able to leave, will you?" He leaned out the open window, holding the box over the ledge. I lunged toward him, screaming for the system in my head. *K. System, where are you? You were right. This kid has gone completely off the rails. You're not going to let me get trapped here, are you? The familiar electronic hum sputtered in my ear, cutting in and out like a bad connection. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost midnight. David turned to look at me and forced a smile. "Don't worry, Dad. I'm going to be someone important one day. I won't let you down." "David," I said, shaking my head, "just because you don't reach a certain goal doesn't mean your efforts were meaningless. Life isn't a contest to see who lives the longest, so dying isn't a failure. And you don't study just so you can inherit a company. Even if you don't, it doesn't mean your education was a waste. What I'm trying to say is, I won't be disappointed in you if you don't become some important person. I don't need you to be impressive. I just want you to be a good person." I looked into his confused eyes, not sure if he understood what I was trying to tell him. I was about to try and explain it more simply when the doorbell rang. The doorbell rang again and again, as if the person on the other side would never stop. Even Ava, who had been sitting silently, stood up. I went to the door and opened it. It was Hannah. She held out her hand to me. "Let's go, James," she said. "It's time to go home." The system, which had been silent, finally spoke in its familiar mechanical voice. "Apologies, host. I was communicating with your wife. Before you came here, we made an agreement with her. If any unforeseen circumstances arose that might prevent you from returning on schedule, we would give her one opportunity to come to this world." I remembered what Hannah had said to me, holding my hand. "If anything goes wrong, I'll come to that world and bring you home, James." And now here she was. Mary, who hadn't seen her mother in a month, leaped into her arms like a little bunny. The narrow doorway suddenly felt like a border between two different worlds. On one side stood Hannah and Mary. On the other were Ava and David. Ava looked at Hannah, her lips pressed together, her voice laced with panic. "James, are you leaving again?" I squeezed Hannah's hand and nodded. "Yes, and after I leave this time, we shouldn't see each other again, Ava. It's over." Ava was well aware that she and her son despised each other. After James left the first time, she had spent a long, long time searching for him. Her friends tried to reason with her. It's not worth it. There are plenty of fish in the sea. If he wanted to leave, let him. It's not like you can't live without him. At first, Ava had thought the same thing. He wasn't from a wealthy family. He didn't run in her social circles. The only thing he really had to offer was his absolute devotion to her. He was, at the end of the day, just an ordinary man. So why would a man like that be the one to leave her? Ava could never understand it. In the end, she directed all of her anger at David. It had to be his fault. He must have listened to his grandfather and said something to disappoint James. The child had been useless and unlikable from the very beginning. If he had any value at all, wouldn't he have been able to keep his father from leaving? Later, when David cried and asked her why his daddy was gone, Ava sneered. It's because you were always making him angry. That's why he abandoned you. David stopped crying. After a long moment, he looked up, his eyes burning with hatred. That's not true. He didn't leave because of me. He left because of you. You weren't even married. He just wanted to go. When James left for the second time, Ava just stood there and watched him walk out the door. He left holding his wife's and daughter's hands, and there was nothing she could do. David ran from the window, screaming at the closed door. Dad, take me with you. Don't leave me behind again. Ava watched his heart break with cold eyes. The door was closed, and there was nothing he could do. Of course, she knew they couldn't have gone far. They didn't have a system. They couldn't just travel between worlds. She pulled David back from the door. Your father left with his precious daughter, she said mockingly. He doesn't want you. Stop making a scene. David sniffled and shook off Ava's hand. He stood up and walked over to the table where James had left his birthday present. What did Daddy get me? He whispered to himself as he opened it. I wonder if it's a pendant he carved himself. He carefully unwrapped the gift. It was just a designer necklace from a store in the mall. David froze. The disappointment was obvious. But then, as if trying to convince himself, he forced a smile. It's okay. I love anything my dad gives me. I'll keep it forever. Before contacting James, the system had run a diagnostic. According to David's life trajectory, there was a high probability he would become the world's primary villain. For the sake of the main world's stability, the system had reached out to James, hoping to avert disaster. The system was secretly glad it had made the choice to use its own points to save James's life. For the past month, it had been observing James's interactions with David. It noticed that in the presence of the father he hadn't seen in years, David's behavior was completely different. He hid all of his malice and prejudice, his arrogance, and his cruelty. He did everything in his power to show his father only his gentle, obedient side. He was like a monster wrapped in gold leaf, beautiful on the outside, but too dangerous to look at directly. It wasn't until the very last day, when James was about to leave, that David finally snapped and lost control. After James was gone, David's villain score shot up to an astronomical level. Other systems came to watch the drama unfold, betting that the boy was now guaranteed to become a major villain. The system was silent for a moment. No, he won't, it said, because it had heard James's final words to his son. I don't need you to be someone impressive. I just want you to be a good person. About 20 years later, the system thought of that little world again and decided to check in. David had officially taken over the Johnson family's company. He was known for being a decisive and brilliant businessman. Ava had retired, living comfortably on her shares. She and her son still rarely saw each other. David had almost no friends. People said of him that he had never been known to do anything wrong, but he certainly wasn't a force for good either. He didn't seem to be a happy person. He was intensely introverted and solitary, as if he had forgotten how to laugh. The core of this story is about the price of our choices and the regret of being unable to have it all. Through David's struggle, it shows us that what children truly crave is unconditional love, not material success. The father's final wish for his son to be a good person shifts the story's focus from success to kindness. Ultimately, the story suggests that even in the face of irreparable loss, genuine love can provide the moral foundation that keeps us from losing our way.